Hi all, we are just about to start. We're waiting for Rahil to be here. Today we're going to have an inside story of about the Racquets, and Rahil is a Pan India distributor for Prince Sporting Goods, and he's also been a pro tennis player. So we'll have an insight about the rackets, their make. Just waiting for Rahil to join. Oh, Rahil. Just before Rahil is not yet here. He should be here. Yes, there is. There he is.
Rahil,
Hi Kiran, how are you?
doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man.
Great to see you
I
here.
hope the lockdown is treating you okay.
Yeah, you know better.
Yeah,
Rahil, we'll start because we just have 1 hour and we'll have to,
yeah,
we have a lot of things to talk about and make sure that we will not disappoint our viewers. Right?
sure.
Rahil, first of all, your introduction is done with the viewers, but let me get started again. Rahil Makaria
Yeah,
is a former pro tennis player. He played quite a lot of tennis in India and abroad as well. And from there, he went on to become a tennis coach as well. And then simultaneously, he started business of Solinco
yeah,
Springs, yeah, along with few friends. And then he's today our interest of the topic is tennis rackets. So we'll
correct.
talk about Rahil is a Pan India distributor for Prince Sporting Goods, and yeah, Rahil, we want to know from how tennis started, and then we come to the Prince racket, right?
Yeah,
How
sure,
did it all
absolutely.
start? How did it all start? Tennis.
How did the entire distributorship business start, or how did?
No, your tennis. Your tennis. We are only talking about Rahil Makaria as a tennis player, as a junior.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I was 9 years old when my parents first took me to the tennis courts. I hated tennis the first time I played it because I couldn't hit or connect even one ball to try to hit the ball over the net, and I really wanted to play cricket, and I was pretty good at cricket at that time. But my mom hated the sport and she wanted me to only and only play tennis, so I was really forced into the game.
Okay.
And luckily I picked up the sport quicker than I anticipated, so I started liking it, and my coach started taking more interest in me. He started putting me into tournaments at the age of 10 itself, so within a year I started playing tournaments. I didn't do too well as a junior. Under 10, under 12, under 14, I was always losing in the qualifying or losing in the first round after qualifying in the main draw. Even under 16, that was the same story. But I started doing really well when I was under 18 and I got into the men's circuit. That's because, luckily I was able to sustain the sport for that long, which is obviously very, very important. I was playing a lot of sports. I used to do a lot of athletics. I used to play a lot of cricket. I used to play a lot of table tennis. So I think that also helped me sustain in the game a little bit longer. My best ranking in men's was top 20 in the country. I did have a couple of ATP points. I think my best ranking was 13 or 1400 ATP. And I think in under 18, my best performance, my most memorable performance would have been reaching the semi-finals of the Sri Ram Nationals. Now the Fenesta Nationals. That time it was called the Sri Ram Nationals. Yeah, and I lost to Rupesh Roy in the semis, who eventually was the national champion that year.
Right.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of our friends have joined. Vishal is here. Punna.
Hi Vishal, how are you? Long time,
Madhu
man.
is here.
Madhu is always in my corner.
Yeah, and Vishnu is one of the he's the main guy behind Indian Tennis Day. Even he's here, and quite a lot of other friends are here. Yes.
Hi, Vishnu.
So Pro Circuit.
Sorry?
Life on Pro Circuit.
Life on Pro Circuit. I enjoyed it a lot, but obviously we had a lot of difficult times. I think during my Pro Circuit time, so that was during the years of 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. These were the 4 years where I played the Pro Circuit, and I ended up playing an average of 20 to 22 tournaments a year. And actually we were quite lucky at that time. India was hosting about 12 futures a year at an average during those 4 years consecutively. So, so 12 tournaments in India, those were fixed. Plus another 8 to 10 tournaments we would end up playing abroad, but mostly in Asia, obviously, or maybe north of Africa, like Nigeria or something like that. So Asia was our go-to place. Indonesia, Iran, been to Iran a couple of times. So the Pro Circuit was, it's obviously not easy. You have to travel a lot alone. You have to work constantly on your game. You have to constantly work on your fitness. I was lucky to have a good group that we were traveling with. It was me, Aditya Matkekar, Arjun Gautam, Alon Moses. The 4 of us used to travel a lot together. We ended up playing a lot of tournaments together. Rohan Gajjar from Bombay used to go join us a lot of times as well. So we luckily had good people working with each other. We all used to practice together. We used to travel together. So that really helped. Doing it all alone would have been even harder, though. Sometimes we did go for tournaments on our own if supposing somebody had other priorities and other tournaments. But overall, it was a very, very good fun. But it was also very, very hard. It used to break us down completely. There were moments when I would want to not get on the court. I didn't want to play another match because either I was not playing too well, or I was struggling with my game, or I was feeling low on confidence. Something was not happening, but you just find a way. You're lucky I had good friends that time helping me out. They were promoting us. They were pushing us to do the right things, and that's somehow that got us through those 4 years of playing professional tennis. And then eventually we got into coaching after that.
Of course. Coaching. Now let's go to coaching. How did your coaching start?
So coaching started in Bangalore. It was 5 of us who started this company called Tennis Excellence Private Limited. And our motto was excel and then success will follow. Don't go for the success, go for the excellence, and then the success will follow. So we started Tennis Excellence in Bangalore. It was 5 of us. It was me, Arjun Gautam, Aditya Matkekar, Alon Moses, Kefi Afzal. He was our fitness head, and he was the director of fitness with all our academies. Our first academy, like I said, was in Bangalore. We had 2 academies or 3 academies in Bangalore when we started off. and within a year we moved to Bombay to expand to further locations. So we were actively coaching from 2009 to 2015. Tennis Excellence as a company was very, very active for those 6 years.
Right.
And in the span of these 6 years, we ended up having centers in Bombay, in Bangalore, in Pune, in Indore, in Bellary, and in Chennai. So we had about 6 cities that we were present in, and we were managing more than 1,500 players. We had a bunch of about 40 professional tournament level players constantly playing with us. Some of the names you would already know, like Aryan Govies, Dhruv Sunish, Adil Kalyanpur that time was training with us. So there were a lot of good players training in Tennis Excellence, and we were managing more than 30 centers with professional academies, buildings, clubs, schools, all of them put together. We were managing more than 30 centers till 2015.
That's a big number for 5 of you guys to manage, right?
Yeah. That's why we also had our differences, but we used to get through that even.
Yeah, amazing. Then business. Then you got in 2010. You got Solinco.
2012 was when we introduced Solinco. 2012 was when we introduced Solinco. There was this one player who had just flown down from Europe, and he had got a bunch of Solinco strings with him, and he was mentioning that, this is a really good string, other than how general strings are cylindrical shaped, they are just round shaped strings.
Right.
This is a special string that is square shaped, and that's the first time I heard of something like that. And I bumped a couple of strings off him, and I started playing with the string, and I really enjoyed them, and I was quite surprised with the amount of power and spin that I was generating with the Solinco. And the one that he made me try out was the Solinco Tour Bite, which also is currently the most popular model in the Solinco range.
Right.
Yes, it's the oldest and the most popular Solinco string in the range, internationally as well as in India. I sent out an email to Solinco asking them if we could procure more products, and they said that they didn't have anyone in India right now to from who we could get the products, and they only offered, do you guys want to take up a small range of distributorship, start off with a small $5,000 order, and start off selling and distributing these strings, promoting these strings in our academy, since we had so many players that we were working with. And we started that off. We contacted 10 or 20 coaches, the top coaches like Hemant Bendre sir and Aditya Sachdeva sir, Suresh Kumar sir from Chennai, Vasudev Reddy from Hyderabad. You were one of the first people who gave me a great feedback, and everybody gave us a positive feedback. Like, out of the 15 or 20 coaches we demoed the strings with, all of them said that they really liked the strings, and one thing led to another. Solinco was also very supportive in their marketing. They never said no to any sponsorship that I would bring on their plate. They were always go with the sponsorships. And one thing led to another, and we're in 2020 now, and we're still selling Solinco, and we're loving working with them. And Solinco is doing really well. And we initially started off in Solinco with 3 strings, and today we have a range of more than 10 different type of strings that Solinco is selling in the Indian market. So
Amazing.
it's pretty impressive with the company what we have managed to achieve.
Long journey managing coaches, players, and parents also have an opinion now.
Yeah.
And let's go to Prince.
But we
now.
couldn't have done this. We couldn't have done this without the support of the coaches and the players. Hats off to all the support.
And the PR, you and your team always, puts in all that effort with the public relations, and you guys manage people. That's the success story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now Prince.
Yeah.
Let's go to Prince. And Prince happened.
Yeah. So we started off.
16.
No, 2015. 2015 we started off with Prince, but initially when we started off with Prince, we were only managing a small area. We were managing the western part of India. We were taking care of 4 states: Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. These were the four states that we were looking after. We did that till 2017 for 2 years. And then in 2017, because of our performance in the western part of India, we managed to bring in the distributorship for the entire country. And hey Martin, how are you doing? Premium Racket Services. These guys are the guys who have trained us with all our customization work over here in India with Restrung India. Martin Mann, he's the official stringer for Yonex for all Grand Slams and was also going to be at the Tokyo 2020, but now I'm assuming he's going to be in Tokyo 2021, hopefully, if the Olympics yet happen.
Yeah, right.
Hi Martin, hope you're doing well, man.
Yes, so rackets.
Yeah, so 2000...
The range in Prince, because it's going to be more of racket. So let's talk about the range in Prince.
Right. So Prince currently has 3 families of rackets, as you can say. One is the Beast series, the one that John Isner endorses. The second one is the Tour series. It's the one that Luca Pouille from France used to endorse. He's actually just shifted over to Babala, but till 2019, his entire season, he played with the Prince Tour. And a newly introduced model in India, not internationally, but in India, is called the Phantom series. This is similar to the racket that David Ferrer used to play with when he was ranked number 5 in the world. Very, very thin beam, super flexible, but great power. So if I were to talk about the 3 series that Prince has, I'll start off with the Beast series, which is the most popular series worldwide as well as in India. The Beast series is for players who like to generate a lot of power and spin from the back of the court. Very good for aggressive baseliners, players who like to generate a lot of topspin when they play. The Beast series is your typical 16-19 stringing pattern with 100 head square inch, available in multiple weights. The most popular weights that the Beast is available in is the 280 gram and the 300 gram. It also comes in 260 grams, 305 grams, as well as the 320 gram. Though the 320 gram is the extra long handle that John Isner uses, so it's not your regular 27-inch racket, it's a 27.5-inch racket. It's the stretch racket.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Though I don't know why John Isner needs the extra stretch, but he yet plays with the stretch racket.
right.
Yeah. And after that comes the Tour series. The Tour series is more for players which like precision with a lot of spin. The Tour series typically has a stringing pattern of 16-18, so it is more wider than the Beast. So it does help the spin, but the beam of the racket is slightly stiffer as compared to the Beast. So it doesn't give you the amount of power that you're looking for in the Beast, but it gives you the right amount of precision. If you're looking to hit lines, if you're looking to hit a lot of coming into the net and playing a lot of volleys, playing a more aggressive baseline game, standing on top of the baseline and hitting the ball hard and deep, that's the racket definitely for you. The Tour series rackets come also in multiple weight categories. The most popular weights are the 290 and the 310 gram series. They also come in 260 grams. They come in 305 grams. These are the 2 other weights that it comes in. Then we come to the Phantom racket, which is a very, very unique racket. Extremely, like I said, the extremely thin beam, the thinnest beam you'll ever find on the circuit, and definitely the most flexible racket amongst all the brands out there, amongst all the rackets that even Prince manufactures. Very flexible racket, super good for people who struggle with arm pain, who struggle with shoulder pain, who struggle with generating power, who have to generate a lot of power by hitting the ball hard. It's a racket that can help you generate power without really muscling the ball through. This racket is thanks Aditya. Aditya really liked the Phantom. He plays with the Phantom a lot.
all oldies.
Even
like
you're
it.
playing with a Phantom, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah, all we oldies like those rackets.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the Phantom
Amazing
comes
racket.
in. It comes in multiple weights. Though in India we've introduced it only in 3 weights. We've introduced it in 290 grams, in 305 grams, and 310 grams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Aditya
Yeah.
says the same thing. Yes, of course, those Wilson and Prince rackets, same. Amazing.
Yeah. It feels fantastic. It feels more like the original graphite that Leander used to play with in 1998. Yeah, nice, flexible, really flexible, super powerful racket. Very good racket. You know the one with the bridge in the center?
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. It feels like that, but it's a very good racket. And this is the range that is currently in Prince, and this is the range that's also there worldwide, and it's doing pretty well. We've been doing really well. Obviously, before the lockdown hit all of us, the rackets were being demanded by everyone. We just introduced the Phantom racket in January in India, and we had a lot of good feedback all the way from Chandigarh, from Pune, from Chennai, from Bangalore. A lot of good feedback from everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, just take us through the metal which is used, and the tennis today is pretty fast. It's getting more aggressive, more powerful, more spin. So, how are these rackets manufactured? Most of them would love to know, what brings in that power in these rackets, and what, how much the control, everything, whatever the player requires, everything is available in these rackets today. I mean, apart from their game, there's so much which is
very important.
Yeah. So just take us through.
So every company has their own technology that they would like to promote in the racket. Prince essentially uses this technology called the Techstream technology.
Right.
It's a kind of a graphite alloy which is used in the shaft of the racket, the neck of the racket, which basically they've angled the graphite in the shaft in such a way that it prevents racket twisting. Now, what is racket twisting? I'm not sure if a lot of people are familiar with this term called racket twisting. Racket twisting is basically the phenomenon when you're making contact with the ball. There's an element where the racket twists in the arm, in the hand a little bit, which causes a deflection in where the ball goes and where you actually want it to go. So let's say if you were to put a racket absolutely flat in front of you at a 90-degree angle, and you were to blast a tennis ball straight at the racket, ideally the ball should come back to you straight.
Right.
But because of racket twisting, sometimes the ball will go up or it'll come back down. It'll change its angle. It'll change the trajectory once it hits the racket. That's because of the racket twisting. Now, what Prince has done by introducing this Techstream in the shaft of the racket is that there is no racket twisting, or it takes off most of the racket twisting. You wouldn't say it takes off all the racket twisting. So it takes off a lot of the racket twisting, providing a lot of stability to the racket. And what people and what other companies generally are able to do with the racket is when they increase the power in the racket, the control falls down. But when they increase the control in the racket, the power falls down.
Yeah, right.
But with the introduction of the Techstream in the Prince rackets, and because of the increased stability, Prince has managed to increase power as well as control without compromising either of the two factors.
Wow,
so that's what Prince has done.
Innovation.
Yeah, so that's what Prince has done. Obviously, other companies have their own technologies. Babala has its tungsten technology. Head has its graphene and its liquid metal technologies. Wilson has its BLX basalt technology. So every company has their own alloys that they use, which they mix with their graphites. Prince's technology, like I said, is the Techstream technology, and it's something that does really well in the rackets. And it's a racket that once you get used to playing, you don't want to shift to any other racket. I would say that Prince rackets maybe take a little bit longer to get used to when you're playing with it. But once you get used to a Prince racket, you don't feel like changing your racket to any other racket. You're very, very happy with your racket.
Right.
That's a general consensus.
Right. This has been experienced. Enough. Yeah, trust me. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. So, that's the main thing with the rackets. Now, most of the rackets are made in China. I don't know if people are going to enjoy that fact that the rackets are made in China, considering that this issue has come up. The Yonex rackets are made in Japan. They're the only rackets made in Japan, but all these companies are making their rackets in China. The process is pretty much similar. They have a mold. They take these graphite sheets, they roll it up into rolls, these long rolls. They put these rolls along the mold of the racket. They take the racket and they bake it into an oven, and out comes a great racket, and then you just drill holes into it to make the grommets fit inside. So it's a very simple process, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that we can't even see and we wouldn't even know.
Absolutely, that's the reason we wanted to hear everything from you. You know better now, right? And before going to the other metals which the rackets are being manufactured, we just wanted to know that you have different swinging patterns, right? 16-18, 14-16, 16-19, 18-20. Just let us know all this. What impact are these swinging patterns going to affect the player or the outcome of the stroke?
Right. So the most commonly used stringing pattern in today's rackets is the 16-19 stringing pattern. It's the stringing pattern that gives you the perfect balance between power and control. That's been proven to be the perfect racket to give you the right amount of power and control on a 100 square inch racket. Now, as the square inches change, people obviously want to change their stringing patterns, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Now we'll only talk about 100 square inch rackets with different stringing patterns. So 16-19, like I mentioned, is the most common pattern used. It gives the perfect balance of power as well as spin. Another stringing pattern that's generally used, a lot of Wilson rackets and a lot of Prince rackets use this stringing pattern. It's called the 16-18 or the 18-16 stringing pattern. It does generate a little bit more power as compared to the 16-19. It's good for players with bigger ground strokes, so it helps them generate a lot more spin. You will compromise a little bit on power, a little bit on control, with the 16-18 stringing pattern, though it doesn't feel very far off from the 16-19. The 16-18 pattern gives you that little bit more pop as compared to a 16-19. Though it does not have any effect on the durability of the string. The 16-18 and the 16-19 generally have the same amount of durability on the string. An extreme stringing pattern that was present in the markets earlier was a 14-16 or a 16-16 stringing pattern. Wilson had come out with that stringing pattern. Prince had come out with that stringing pattern. These were the two companies that had experimented with that stringing pattern. The reason why people went for that wider stringing pattern, as they call it, it's called a wider stringing pattern because the holes in the string, the spacing between the strings would just increase drastically. It's because the amount of spin that it would generate. Now, the wider the stringing pattern, you're going to definitely generate a lot more spin off the ball. And why does that happen? Because when you're hitting the ball, when you're hitting a forehand, your racket is like this, or when you're hitting a backhand, your racket is like this, right? So you're hitting with the mains. Now the mains are the strings that fall from top to bottom. The vertical strings are the mains, the horizontal strings are called the crosses. So when you're hitting a forehand or the backhand, the mains are the strings that are generally hitting the ball, and when they hit, the string moves up and down when it makes contact with the ball because of the spin. So the amount of spin that is put on the ball is decided by the amount of kickback that the string generally has to come back in position. So when you're making contact with the ball, the string moves out of position because you're making contact with the ball. The ball has moved the string out of position. But when the ball releases from the racket, the string kicks back into its original position. And the greater the kickback that the string gives on the ball, the greater the spin that the ball is going to generate. So if you have more space for the string to move, the string is going to move out of position to a further off location and come back to its original position with a lot more velocity. But if there is a lesser space, the string will not have too much space to move, so automatically you will generate a lot less spin as compared to a wider stringing pattern. Though there's a big trade-off for wider stringing patterns is the durability of the string. Like with a 14-16 or a 16-16 stringing pattern, your durability of the string will reduce by at least 50% as compared to a 16-18 or a 16-19. 50%. So if you're a person, if you're a player who breaks the strings once every 3 days, you'll be breaking the string once every 1.5 days. But the spin generation is unbelievable. And you will obviously have to maybe string a little bit tighter because you are going to lose a little bit of control on the ball as well. One of the most popular stringing patterns in the early 2000s was the 18-20 stringing pattern, which I think a lot of the pros on the international circuit still use an 18-20 stringing pattern. Very good for people who have very strong back of the court strokes. You know, they have very strong strokes who really like to power and muscle the ball. They like to hit the ball a lot flattish and they really like to hit big serves. 18-20 stringing pattern generally is not going to generate a lot of spin for you, alright, but it's going to give you phenomenal control.
Because of the smaller
holes.
Spaces,
I wish you give me such a which racket suits me the best. I mean, you can play with a cricket bat. I don't even think he needs a racket, man, to play with. The amount of talent this guy has, I don't think I even need to give him a racket.
Give him a spoon, he'll hit in the middle of the racket.
I don't need to give him a racket. I just give him a cricket bat and he can, I think, still beat a lot of the players playing even in the men's circuit today. It's unbelievable.
Of course. That was a lot of physics from you. That's a lot of physics from you, Rahil.
But I'm not yet done. Sorry. So, like I was saying, 18-20 stringing pattern, very, very good for players who like to hit the ball aggressively. Like I said, from the back of the court, like to really muscle the ball. Like to hit the ball flat. Very good for players with huge ground strokes, you know, because they don't want to hold back. You know, players who don't like to hold back on their ground strokes, who like to swing freely, 18-20 stringing patterns also suit them really, really well. So that's the general consensus of stringing patterns. Head had come out with a very interesting concept of being able to switch your stringing pattern within the same racket. So they would give you extra grommets, but unfortunately when you would switch to the other stringing pattern, I think when you'd switch from a 16-19 to a 16-18 or something like that, they had when you would make this 18-19. When you would switch to the 18-19, the racket wouldn't feel so good. So I don't think a lot of people prefer that and had discarded that concept, though it was a very interesting concept. And kudos to the brand for even trying that out, you know. I mean, we really like brands who like to experiment, and you know, if you experiment, it's only then you find out what's really working, what's not working. In the 1900s and the early 2000s, brands were only taking out stringing patterns which were 18-20, and then Babala was one of the first brands that took out a 16-19 stringing pattern, and today Babala is one of the highest selling international rackets. So unless and until you don't experiment, you don't know what people are going to like, you know.
Right. That's a lot of physics from you, Rahil. Seriously.
I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time. I just love talking about these things, man.
Mostly nobody tells all these things. You know, you're doing this. I'm asking you all these things because nobody tells this. You just you go to a retailer or someone, they are just going to sell you a racket. They're not going to tell you all these specs.
But then we have knowledgeable coaches like you also out there.
Me? Thank you. I really appreciate it. that has to be there. And let's go. Let's
Hi,
go
Varun. How's
Varun is
Dehradun?
here. Varun is here. Then let's go to the different metals. As you mentioned, as we all know, but I want you to tell the different types of racket metals. You told about the frames and the graphite and textreme. What are the other metals which are being sold in the market regularly?
So when you mean metals, okay, that way. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So generally, rackets are segregated into three broad types. You either have a full graphite racket, you either have a composite graphite racket, or you have an aluminium racket. These are the three broad type of rackets that the rackets are distinguished. The professionals, the pro rackets as people call it, they are generally called full graphite or full carbon rackets, where they use anywhere upwards of 90% of graphite or carbon in the racket, and they use any other metal. It could be aluminium, it could be magnesium, it could be tungsten, it could be any other material which they mold into the graphite to make the graphite either stronger or more flexible or more powerful, whatever it is. Graphite composite rackets are basically rackets in which there is an element of graphite.
That's the second.
Yeah, that's the second one. That's the second one. This is not a professional racket. This is a racket for people who are intermediate players, people who are not professional players, people who like to keep it amateur, at the amateur level. I wouldn't even say club level, because today club level players play very, very good level of tennis. This is for someone who maybe plays, who maybe plays tennis once in 10 or 15 days. This is a racket that would be recommended to him. It's called graphite composite, the material. What you mean by graphite composite is that the amount of graphite that goes into the racket is lower than 50% of the total amount of graphite used in the racket. I think Aditya has a question for us. How does head heavy or grip heavy affect the game of the player?
We'll come back to that in a while.
We'll come back to that. That's for another session.
Aditya, that's a great question. He's coming back with that answer.
After the aluminium. We'll definitely come back with that. Yeah, so we'll talk about the graphite composite. So like I said, graphite composite is basically rackets in which there is 50% or lower graphite used, but there's yet a component of graphite. So most of the graphite is, in this case, is generally used in the neck of the racket, and the entire head of the racket is generally an aluminium frame. So that's what's called graphite composite. Generally, graphite composite rackets you would find in the weight category of 275 or 270 and above. You wouldn't find a racket which is lighter than 270 grams, which is graphite composite, because any other material other than graphite is just too heavy to make the racket. And you cannot make a light graphite composite racket. And the third quality of racket that we have is the basic aluminium racket. This is generally recommended for not only beginners but for players who are below the age of 10, because generally a player who's 6 years old or 7 years old or 8 years old would be playing with that racket for not more than 3 to 6 months, because he moves on to the next size of the racket very quickly. Aluminium rackets are very inexpensive. You can get an aluminium racket anywhere between 500 rupees to 1500 rupees. An aluminium racket is basically a starter racket. It's an introduction to the game. It has got 0% of graphite in it. It's basically an aluminium sheet that's molded into the frame of the racket, and it's very, very simple to make, really. And aluminium rackets also.
They come in different sizes, right?
Correct. They come in 21, 23, 25, 26 and 27. You do get full size aluminium rackets, but it's generally not recommended to pick up a full size aluminium racket. If you want an inexpensive racket because you're not a frequent player, it's better to buy a composite graphite racket rather than just an aluminium racket.
Right. That's a lot of information, right?
I can go on. Like
Yes, I know.
But
I know, of course. We just have 20 more minutes left. But then
Yeah.
we will just get to. Anand is also here. Anand
hey,
says hi.
Anand.
He's given a
Hi,
thumbs
how are
up.
you, man?
There is Shilpa Dalmia as well.
Hello.
Then Shilpa Dalmia also says something. Thank you for all your support from Shivam Dalmia, Yashpal Dalmia, sir, Sumitra, Jagaddio Verma, and entire family of my academy. Right. Then, yeah, Aditya's question. How does head heavy or grip heavy affect the game of a player?
So, head heavy rackets definitely affect the game of a player.
Right.
Head heavy racket would essentially increase the amount of power that the
Yeah.
racket is going to be putting onto the ball, because a head heavy racket would generally put more weight onto the ball.
Right.
So if a racket, if this is a racket and the racket is evenly balanced, the racket would just stay like this. But if a racket is
Right.
head heavy, the racket would generally lean towards the front.
Right.
It helps, like I said, generate a lot of power on the ball, because it makes your racket heavier and you're putting more weight on the ball when you're hitting it. Obviously, you should be strong enough to manage a head heavy racket. It
Right.
does help you generate a lot more power, especially on the serves a lot, because your head is what is driving through the ball on the serve. And if you do have the strength and the skill, a head
Yeah.
heavy racket definitely helps you generate a lot of spin on the ball.
Okay.
Definitely lets you generate a lot of spin, but you have to have the strength and the skill level to control that head of the racket. Very important. Now, you don't want people just going and putting weight on the head of the racket and, hitting the ball for sixers and, them joining
Right.
IPL instead of,
Right.
Kiran's tennis academy. you know so
Yes, yes.
But a grip heavy racket, a
Right.
butt heavy racket, all right, is generally what pros use. Pros
Right.
generally use butt heavy rackets because they are very strong. Pro players are very strong. I mean, pro players are extremely fit.
Right.
They manage to play 4-5 hours of very, very high intensity level tennis. So they generally have head heavy rackets because they generally have grip heavy rackets because grip heavy rackets is very good for control.
Right.
It helps you keep the control on the ball a lot better than a head heavy racket. A grip heavy racket helps the professional player to swing through freely, without having the worry of them missing the ball by a few inches and centimeters, because that's where they are making their money, right? By those few
Right.
inches and
Right.
centimeters.
Yes.
So it helps them swing through freely.
Right.
Grip heavy racket also makes your racket more maneuverable.
Right.
So in doubles, all right, if you were to use a grip heavy racket,
Right.
you would see that you are able to maneuver the speed of your racket, especially at the volleys, a lot faster. You will be able to react a lot faster with a grip heavy racket because you will be able to move the head of the racket a lot faster. So
Right.
even though you're able to generate a lot more racket speed,
Yeah.
all right, you're not necessarily going to be able to generate a lot of power, but you're definitely going to be able to maneuver the racket a lot quicker.
Right.
So that's what a grip heavy racket does for you. And most of the pros generally prefer grip heavy rackets. You'll find that the rackets are 340 grams, but the balance of the racket is more towards the grip of the racket.
Yeah, that the day after tomorrow on we're going to have the customization of racket. We're
Absolutely.
going to
Absolutely.
know all those things will come there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. Right. And next, somebody asked the question there.
I hope, Aditya, that was the right answer, because even you have a lot of knowledge with respect to these things. He loves testing me, that guy.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure. Somebody else? Oh no, yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, I mean, we
Okay,
can
I
ask
think
them.
You answered quite a lot of questions before we asking any questions.
I hope so.
Yeah. And if these Beast, Tour and Phantom, 3 types of rackets are supposed to be given to the top three in the world, which one would you prefer to give? Federer,
Okay,
Nadal,
so
and Novak.
okay,
Which
so
one do you think will suit them?
let's see.
Right.
So I think the beast would definitely suit Nadal because
Yeah.
it's a clear-cut
Exactly.
racket that
Yeah.
is very very high on spin and very very high on power, and I think it
Yeah.
would suit Nadal's game.
Yes.
I think the Phantom would suit Roger.
Yeah.
It's a nice
Perfect.
thin blade.
Yeah.
It looks like his black Wilson that he uses. It's a black racket, the Phantom. Very flexible racket, and again, like I said, very powerful at the same time. You need someone with his wizardry to manage that racket,
Yeah.
and yeah, Djokovic for the tour because the tour is a hardcore counter puncher racket. The tour is a very very good racket for good strong counter punchers.
Yeah. These for Nadal.
Yeah, there you go. Nadal
of
all
course.
bees for Nadal. There you go. Djokovic tour and the Phantom
Tour
for
and-
Fed.
So, yeah, of course. And just talk about the rackets which these three pros use.
Yeah.
Why do they specifically use those rackets?
They get a lot of money, man, to use those
Of course,
rackets.
that is one thing, but I'm sure they're all customized, right, for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I don't know if any people know that, but Nadal's racket, for example, his grip size is 4 1/4. I don't know
Right.
how many people know that, but Nadal generally plays with a very very thin grip.
Right.
His racket is specially designed for him in the Babolat French factory. It's not made in China. His racket is not made in China. His racket is made in France by Babolat themselves. He generally uses the oldest version of the Pure Drive, which was, I think it was a full black model that had come out
Yeah.
first of the
Yeah.
Pure Aero. Sorry, not the Pure Drive. He was
Pure
earlier
Aero.
using the Pure Drive. Yeah, the Pure Aero. It was a
Yeah.
black color. It was a full black color racket, and it's the same racket which has been repainted for him, and he's been using the same racket ever since because that suited him the best. Even though when he was a junior, he used to play with the Pure Drive, the one that Andy Roddick was endorsing.
Right.
Before
yeah.
that.
Carlos Moen.
If you look at Djokovic's racket, he's obviously using the
Play with
speed.
blade, right? He used to play with a blade which was 18.
He used to play with the Wilson blade. He used to play with the Wilson blade, which is an 1820.
Right.
I think what I've heard, and I'm not sure, I could reconfirm this in our next conversation, but I think Djokovic is using the Prestige, the head Prestige, the old head Prestige, because that's a classic racket. That's what actually most of the players use on the international circuit, the head Prestige, very famous racket. Though the head Prestige that the players use, all right, is not manufactured in China. It's manufactured in Austria, and these are called pro stock rackets. Each racket is for 400 euros a racket, so that's 30,000 rupees a racket.
Right.
Right. So these are pro stock rackets made in Austria. The rackets that are sold commercially, the ones that you and I or any other player who's not in the top 200 uses, is basically they're called commercial rackets.
Right.
They're not called pro stock rackets. Yeah. So this is something which is very very different. But even on his pro stock racket, I don't know if you guys have noticed Djokovic's rackets recently. He's been adding weight on the edges of the racket to help him reduce the vibration on the racket, and he's been obviously winning everything that he's been playing ever since.
Right.
Federer's racket, I mean, when Federer started playing, he played with the 85 square inch. He started off with the Wilson Pro Staff 85 square inch classic racket. Yeah.
Original.
Moved to the original. He moved from there. He moved to a 90. From there, he moved to a 97 directly. He didn't move to the 95. Though again, Federer's rackets are very unique. Federer's rackets are made after taking into consultation what Federer wants and how he wants it to feel. Now, Federer is someone who can be a designer himself. You know, he's that much of a genius. You know, he really knows exactly what needs to go in the racket, what he wants from the racket, And it's pretty insane, like how a guy has been around playing tennis for the last 20 years, and he's been top 3 in the world for the last 20 years. And he's modified his game, he's modified his service action, he's modified his backhand, he's modified his physical training, he's modified the way he eats, he's modified even his racket. Like, he's come from an 85 square inch racket to a 97 square inch racket just to compete. What is the difference in manufacturing in China and head in Austria and Babylon in Spain?
We'll answer Varun's, because we're falling short of time. We just have another 8 minutes to go.
So I'm saying Federer, like I said, he was able to adjust and adapt to 20 years of the game changing, and he didn't even hold back on his racket. He adapted from an 85 to a 90 to a 97, and today he's playing with a 97. I'm sure he's changed weights in the middle. I remember he was playing with a 370 gram racket. I think he's brought it down by 30 grams, to make it more maneuverable. So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting what he's doing.
Right. And coming to Varun, that was a lot of knowledge, Rahil.
Yeah.
Varun, your question: what's the difference in manufacturing in China and head in Austria and Babylon in Spain?
Though Babylon actually is a French company, so they manufacture in France. But basically, when the rackets are manufactured in their own factories, either Austria or Spain, these are called pro stock rackets. So they're not manufactured in bulk. They're manufactured as per the player's specifications, with what they want and how they want the racket. Now, what happens in China is they mass produce the rackets. Let's say head, they give the rackets, they give the specifications to the Chinese factories, and the Chinese factories are just mass producing the rackets. If they say they want a 300 gram racket, the racket will be 304 grams, the racket will be 308 grams, it will be 290 grams, 278 grams. There will be a difference in weight, there will be a difference in swing weight, there will be a difference in balance of the racket. Not every racket will come out the same. And you are just buying commercial rackets, and every racket is going to actually play differently. But when you're buying the racket from Austria, when you're buying pro stock rackets, the racket is exactly to the specification that you want. So you basically are telling the company that this is the racket that I want. I want a head Prestige with an 1820 stringing pattern, with a grip size 4-1x4, with 327 weight, with 319 swing weight, and a 32.3 centimeter square balance. If you give them these specifications, they will make them to exactly your specification. You cannot do that in China. China is going to make a 300 gram racket, then they'll make a 315 gram racket. Let's say if somebody wants a 308 gram racket, then what do? That's where these Austrian guys come in. And these guys make rackets exactly what you want. But obviously, because it's Austrian engineering, because the materials that they use are also far superior, you are talking about paying that premium of 400 euros a racket instead of just maybe 150 euros a racket.
Right. And are the metals same, almost same? What and the commercial
so the quality,
racket
the material is the same, but the quality of the graphite is better.
Right.
The quality of the graphite is more premium. It's a little bit more rare. It's a little bit more scarce, that graphite. So that's why the cost is a little bit higher.
Right. That's a lot of information from you, Rahil. Varun, I guess he's answered your question. Abhinav is here. Abhinav is one of the old students with us. Can a player not in top 200 source a racket from the home factory?
So, if you go to Austria and if you go to France, yes, you can.
Yeah.
It's an open to all facility. Right. But if you're sitting over here in India, you're going to have to contact the Indian distributor. You're going to have to request the Indian distributor to source these rackets for you.
Right.
Or the other option is if you contact your top players. So let's say if you have a relationship with a Purav Raja, for example, or if you have a relationship with a Jivan or a Prajnesh, who do have access to these people because they meet them in Grand Slams regularly. If you put in a request to them and they put in a request to the company to send the rackets to India, that's also a possibility. Sometimes the distributor might not support or might not help you because it's a headache for the distributor to just bring in 2 rackets, from the company. It's a logistical pain. But if you request one of the pro players, it might be an easier process.
Right.
So you can access it. And if you do plan to go to Europe, though I wouldn't recommend it in 2020, but if you do plan to go to Europe, then you can go to Austria or France, and you can get it from them. It's an open to all. They don't have any reservations over there.
Super. Yes, Rahil,
Yeah.
anything you want to add on?
No, I mean, thank you so much for this opportunity, man. It's been awesome.
One more, we have
I think
another
we got
question.
another question.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
much of an actual difference does the material make if both rackets are of the same weight? Sorry, I didn't get that.
So I think if the racket is the same weight, the racket is the same weight. But in terms of the quality of the material, the better the quality of the material, all right, the racket is going to respond better to you.
Right.
So let's say if the racket, if you have a 100% input in the racket when you're hitting the ball, the racket will give you 100% output when you're hitting the ball. Let's say if you're giving 100% input in an inferior quality material on the racket, all right, you will get maybe only 80% of an output from the racket. So that's where the material comes into play. So if you're using a substandard quality material in the racket, or the racket is made with substandard quality material, what you're going to expect the racket to give you, or what feed you're going to get from the racket, is definitely going to be off. That's going to be the main difference. The other difference is obviously going to be the racket could just break. I mean, if you're using crappy material, the racket could just break in your hand if you hit it at a very high speed, or if you miss hit, or you don't hit the racket if you don't hit the ball on the racket in the correct spot, it could just break.
Right. I think you answered that.
I think we got one more question. Hello sir, what are all the ways to customize your racket except the lead tape? I think that's for our customization.
Yeah, that's the customization session which we are going to do on we are going to do day after tomorrow. On
yes, so we should leave that question for that date.
Yes, exactly. And last question from my side, Rahil.
Yeah.
The rackets, rackets tend to break, right? You slam the racket down, or how can you figure out if the player has slammed it down, or what are the if there is a manufacturing defect, where the break happens?
So generally so if you look at the racket, it's a circle. It's like a clock, right? 12 o'clock being on top, 6 o'clock being at the bottom, right? So if you look at the 3 and 9, if the racket generally breaks on top of the 3 and 9, so between 3 to 12, and between 6 to 12, if the racket breaks in those spots, it's generally because of racket abuse or a mishit.
Right.
If the racket breaks from below the 3 and 9 spots, from below that, it's generally because of manufacturing defect. Though sometimes if you're serving, and if you're not, if you're sweating a lot, if you're perspiring a lot, and the racket slips out of your hand while serving, and the racket hits the ground really hard, your racket could also break from the neck at that time. But that's obviously because the racket has been slammed on the ground, and that's not because of a manufacturing defect. But 90% of the times, if the racket has a manufacturing defect, it will break from below the 3 and 6 o'clock positions.